So first of all, welcome here to BuildSphere number 32. This is the format where we are introducing the builders that are populating IOTA with cool dApps and allow them to showcase a little bit what they are doing, get an intro for the community. And this is what we are here for today. I'm your host, Jonathan, hiding behind the IOTA account. And looking at my script, the tweet is pinned. I think we are good to get right into the introductions. James, why don't we start out with you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and also the role that you play at Salus, please.
Hey, good to speak with you all. Thanks very much, Jonathan. So my name's James Rilett. I have been around commodities trade, for a couple of decades. It's changed a lot in some ways since I started, but it's not changed significantly, actually, for like hundreds of years since it was, invented in the Middle Ages. And I've always been quite an avid technologist. So I used to be a commodities trader. I was always using data and kind of big data, machine learning before it was a thing. So the power of technology is real. And I guess my DeFi story starts probably 2015, 16. I was working at a big market data provider, so S&P Global. So if you trade commodities, you use their prices. I was the director of innovation there. I sold a business there, and had a really great team that was working with new and funky technology. So of course, blockchain was on the radar. And really, from that point, the more I read, the more I understood that, so back in 2016, 17, there was a lot of hype. People really, it was kind of, blockchain was a bit of a hammer looking for a nail. But actually, if you were to look at the problems around international trade and commodities trade, and it hadn't been invented, you would invent the technology, you would invent real world assets coming on chain, and that's really what we've been working on since. So I've done a few different things since then, but really was very proud to co-found this business and start working with IOTA to actually make it happen. And since we did that, so we started the business back in April. It's been an idea for a while, but having moved into it full time since then, the Genius Act has happened, stable coins going mainstream, but really building things for real on chain and doing things in trade. There's actually not so many people doing that, and really the IOTA ecosystem and family and ethos was a really good fit. So super happy to be building Salus with IOTA. So my role is a little bit more on the kind of investor side. So we have two types of people who come to our platform. We have the people that need financing, so mining companies and trading houses, and then we have the funders, the people who want a return for their capital. So I'm a little bit more on that side. My co-founder Trevor Skidmore is a bit more on the other side. But yeah, my role is to make sure that we build quickly and compliant, and we get as many transactions on chain as we can.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks for that, James. Great to have you here today. Jens, why don't we start out with a quick introduction on your behalf as well?
Hey, happy to. Good to have you, Jonathan. So my name is Jens Munk, and I'm part of the IOTA Foundation. I've been that for quite a while now. And I lead all our efforts around international trade and supply chains. And we have made quite a stride into this industry the last couple of years. So what we're working on is making IOTA the fundamental blockchain for international trade and supply chains. And we do that through the Twin Foundation that some people might have heard of, which is basically setting up an infrastructure using identity of IOTA data capabilities and tokenization to allow the industry and tailor it to the industry of supply chains and international trade, which is probably the biggest use case, one of the biggest use case for blockchain today. And then enabling business opportunities on top of that infrastructure, like Salus and what James and his team is doing very successfully. So that's really exciting. So that was just a short intro.
But a good one nonetheless. And over to you, Dom.
I mean, I'm Dom. I'm one of the founders of IOTA, right? And I think what excites me the most is, like we saw this evolution of IOTA over the last decade, and what started out with a very big vision is now actually becoming a reality, right? And I think we're closer than ever with the work that we're doing with Twin, right, with Jens and the team there, and the work that we're now starting to do with Salus and also with James, to bring the real world on chain. And I think this is really what blockchain is for. And to James' point before, 2017, 2018 was really like the peak of the hype cycle, where we were all shooting in a million different directions. And I always used to joke that we used to have a head of space at IOTA. That just shows you how out there many of these ideas were, right? Like where we were trying to explore of different use cases and stuff like that. But now with the work that we've been doing for the last, I think like 7 years now in trade, we really become being entrenched as this core infrastructure piece, or core infrastructure, which is for one, digitizing trade, right? That this is what Twin is for. We're issuing digital identities for the traders, making it possible for them to actually do cross-border trades, to trust each other across countries, thanks to our digital identity work. And now in this next phase, we're actually tokenizing physical assets, right, rare earth minerals, commodities, trade receivables, bringing them on chain. And with that, we're really starting a revolution, because this is now the real yield ledger, where we're bringing these really stable and safe assets on chain that are paying real yield, right? Like keep in mind, like the deals that were being funded on Salus today, there's somebody willing to pay the 10-15% because they need to have the instant liquidity and don't want to wait the 30, 60, 90 days, right? So this is real yield that is coming on chain. I think this is really where we are combining the best concepts and principles that were born out of DeFi, right? Building up decentralized exchanges and lending markets and stable coins. And we're combining that with real assets that are being put on chain, thanks to the work that we're doing in tokenization and thanks to Salus and Twin. So I think for me, this is really like an incredibly exciting new era that we're starting here with IOTA. And I think this will really be groundbreaking for the entire blockchain space.
And for the entire commodity market. I think it's there has been, it's a really big prize. Like you mentioned, the yields, those are really typical. The people today just don't have access to finance, and the alternative means that you have a lot of people stepping into the middle and taking big premiums. There's a reason that commodity traders report these huge profits, and part of that is because they can deploy their balance sheet to fund things, and they can solve the really sticky real world problems around trade and title. And actually, the technology to solve that is much more elegant, and it can drive a lot more equity for people in those resource-rich countries, simply through providing balance sheet. And that's really revolutionary. And I think something really exciting and interesting is just about to happen, and it's the infrastructure that needs to be deployed to power it.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd be interested to learn, and hopefully the audience as well, how we arrived today here at having this talk. So obviously things have been happening in the background. So I'm wondering whether you could walk us a little bit through the ideation and planning process that, ultimately resulted in the launch of the Salus platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned I've done different jobs in commodities trading. One of the hardest jobs is access to finance. So you have big trade finance departments. You have to build relationships with banks. So I was actually working at a physical commodities trading house, a big one, like with proper backing, and it was proving really difficult to fund, particularly these flows of critical minerals, because they're in complicated places. They have complicated minerality, small companies, and like banks and traditional finance, they don't like this. They don't like complexity. It's difficult for lots of good reasons and lots of less understandable reasons. There just wasn't any liquidity in this space. So we were thinking this is a problem. And as a technologist, I was like, well, the unlock is here. Like you just need more data, more trust, and actors to come into a different way of doing things, not this old school world of PDF documents being emailed around the world, which understandably has quite a lot of friction and sometimes a lot of problems. So we're kind of noodling on this problem. And a long time colleague actually gave me my first job trading, I think 20 years ago, at the Trade Flow Capital team. So Tom James headed up Trade Flow Capital. Trade Flow Capital is a fund, a hedge fund that has been deploying capital into trade and had really done a lot in the last 5 years to digitize their back office and really prove that you can use technology to manage risk. So they've done 4,000 transactions. They've deployed over $4 billion of capital across lots of different commodities flows, but really working to use technology to make trade better so that you can deploy capital. And we've always kept in touch. He's been a really great friend and mentor to me of my career. And we were talking about how we could solve this problem for critical minerals specifically, and what specifically needed to happen to bring that risk management approach and that tokenization into this really important growth sector for the global economy. And so we kind of looked around and we realized nobody else was going to do it. So we needed to get on with it. So we founded the business in April, joint venture, using some of that proven technology and methodology and extending it and specifically focusing in on, I guess, real world asset on ramp for critical minerals. And that's the core purpose. That's why we're there. And so we've been really pleased with the speed at which we've been able to cover the ground. And it's looking pretty good.
Sorry, I think I'm unmuted now. Sorry, small glitch there. Yeah, so I understand that the fragmentation of data is complicating trade dramatically. So I like to always ask the devil's advocate question here, and that is, why would you not just use an Amazon Web Service, for example, to aggregate that data? What is really the benefit of writing it on chain?
Yeah, there's lots of good reasons. To be fair, digitization in general would be great in this industry, but actually, there's been pockets of that. And I mentioned there was a fund that was able to move their capital and run their process very well. But the problem is, you always end up defaulting to the non-digital part of the chain. And I have to say, sorry to say, for any bankers out there, it's typically the banks who require a wet ink signature or a fax copy, or who don't acknowledge your API of data. So there's a trust problem. Equally, these flows of minerals, they're high value, they're in secure places, they're insured, but they're a target for theft or fraud. So you don't want to be putting that to anybody that you don't know and trust. So there's a persistent trust problem. You have to share your provenance and your data, but you don't want to share it with the world, and you don't necessarily want to rely on a trusted intermediary. And quite frankly, there isn't a trusted intermediary who can move between all these spaces. So what we've been able to create using Twin infrastructure is the ability to move that title on chain and to build the trust infrastructure around that allows the transaction with its many different counterparties and actors and components to trust and to see what they need to see when they can see it, and to know that they can trust it even if they can't see the underlying. So it genuinely is an old school decentralization blockchain use case, but it requires significant management and handling of the data upstream and getting it into a position where you can get that title document on chain and start transacting around it.
I think, can I adjust to that, James? If you look into how trade is today, you will realize that it's actually governed by, and exactly what James is saying, multiple manual paper documents. The estimate is 4 billion pieces of documents that moves around the world today to govern this, and it is tempting to put everything into one centralized database where everybody can access it, right? And there has been those kind of attempts has actually been done, not very successful. One of them was TradeLens, that was trying to do that with the IBM and Maersk, and it get to your question, Jonathan. and as you said as well, James, the trust is not there when you do that. That's one problem. And with our technology, we can solve that trust problem. And then at the same time, the regulation has developed. You now have regulation in increasing number of countries. I think we are up to 50% of world trade is covered by a new regulation called the Model Law on Transferable Digital Documents, which means that you can activate a title document that you tokenize. You can move the ownership around of that document, and you can be recognized in a court case. So the fact that Salus and the team can put the title document on chain, and they can prove that they can transfer that ownership on a fully digital environment. That gives these new use cases a new life. And I mean, it's super exciting to see what Salus is doing there, because they are the spearhead in the industry doing this kind of things.
Yeah, thanks, Jens. Makes sense.
Yeah. Maybe just to add one thing here, right? Like, if not cross-border trade, then why, right? Then why? Where else would blockchain really make sense, right? Like in cross-border trade, this is one of the main reasons why blockchain really makes fundamental sense, because we're talking about different systems where goods are being transported across border. And the very reason why paper documents are still accepted today, because it's like one of the most oldest forms of keeping records, right? And it's sort of universally accepted, because if you receive a paper document, you know how to read it, right? And this is why there has not been any proper data standard established yet that is really universally accepted, because exactly these issues related to come to an agreement on standards and coordinating around adopting these standards, right? And so I think this is exactly where blockchain comes into place, because the way that we see IOTA is we see IOTA as this trusted infrastructure which is being used and leveraged by all of these governments to securely share data with each other, right? And everything that we're putting on chain on IOTA, whether it's paper documents, right? And we're talking about millions of paper documents that are being digitized on IOTA, so that you have a verifiable record that has been issued by a certain entity, right? Is authenticated and is tamper-proof. Now you can actually trust this digital data. And it's exactly why blockchain makes sense, and why it's doing something that we are doing with IOTA has only been possible now and has not been possible before with a simple database solution, because we're really introducing trust into the entire process, right? And so what we're doing here is we're digitizing millions of paper documents. We're putting them on chain into trusted records. We're issuing digital identities for all these traders, right? All these companies that want to trade with each other. Now they have a digital identity issued on IOTA, on the mainnet, and they can start trading with each other, right? You know where somebody's coming from. You know that they have received a verifiable identity by the Kenyan revenue authorities, by the Rwandan mining board, right? Whatever else might be, you can trust this identity because it is cryptographically secure and is certified. And now in this next phase, we're obviously doing the tokenization piece, which is incredibly exciting, because now we're talking about bringing billions, if not trillions of assets on chain, so that they can be used as collateral within DeFi protocols, so they can be used to transfer around title ownership. And with that, we're building up an entire trade ecosystem. We're putting all of trade on chain, right? And that is like a huge opportunity. And I think our main objective with IOTA is really to build a real business around this infrastructure, right? In the same way that Amazon Web Services is a real business, it's a cloud infrastructure, right? It makes money by selling compute. The same way is going to be true on IOTA, where we have these use cases, and the premier area of use cases or vertical that we focus on is everything around trade, which is like a third or a quarter of our global economy, right? We're talking about $30-40 trillion of the global economy that is just related to trade and trade finance. So I think there's like a huge opportunity for us to focus on that. And I think with what we have with Twin and what we have with Salus and also other partners that we're onboarding right now, we have a really big shot here at being the infrastructure that is going to bring trade on chain.
Can I give a little example? I know we're talking about minerals today, but can I talk about chicken for 2 seconds, just as an example of what Dom is talking about here? we had we right now we're doing some pilots with the UK government and with Cabinet Office, and so we are tracking chicken from Poland into UK. And the other day, 3 loads of chicken, which is a frozen commodity. It has to be checked at the border that it's healthy and so on, came to the UK borders, and the health inspector in Poland made a mistake. He wrote the health certificate number was 36678, and it should have been 36677. So when they stand with 3 loads of frozen chicken at the borders and the number is wrong on one of the documents, well, the border force or the border police says, sorry, you can't come in. So what happens in that situation is that they can't just get a new document because it's manual, it's documents. They can't get this new updated document with that mistake fast enough to the borders. So the trucks need to go back. And you have a rule around how long time can frozen food be on a truck, even though it's a a refrigerated truck. It can only be, I think they say 24 hours before it needs to go into a warehouse. So they had to throw out 3 full loads of chicken because they couldn't, ratify this document and the mistake on it in a digital way that the borders could see immediately. And that illustrates why this use case is so major as it is. And I'm sure that, and well, I don't hope you're going to have the same kind of problems in Salus, but these kind of examples just show also for critical minerals, why is it important that you can do these things online and digital.
Yeah, I mean, critical minerals don't go off or defrost, but they can have all kinds of costs associated with those sorts of frustrations. I have 100 different horror stories about the costs of, a typo in a document, or like a miss, 1 decimal place on one form somewhere. And these are very high value commodities that are very expensive to move around. So the cost of demurrage, it's called in freight, or like delay, it could be tens of thousands a day, and it happens all the time. So there's plenty of margin in the global trade economy to make it more efficient. So plenty of, I mean that as in scope for improvement, but also like people will pay for this. People are, we are happy to, our clients pay to have their trades come through our platform, to have a more frictionless experience. And big part of that is documentary trust on IOTA.
Yeah. And by the way, James, I would and sorry, Jonathan, if you have this as one of your questions, but I think one of the origin stories of IOTA was really around the Internet of Things, right? Like the machine economy, connecting devices, equipping them with wallets, audit trails, and stuff like that. And I think a lot of that was really big visions, right? And it sort of died down a little bit because we also became a lot more concrete with our work in trade and payments and the tokenization. But one of the things that I absolutely love about Salus is that you guys aren't just about digitizing the process, you're also about sort of like certification and providing trust that the goods are actually there. Because as you said, one of the biggest issues today is like, we're talking about having physical goods in a warehouse or being transported somewhere and then issuing a tokenized digital form around that. Now, the biggest challenge that all of us have is how do you actually have this link between the digital token, right, which is supposed to represent legal ownership over the physical asset, and how do you make that in a way where everybody trusts that? And I think this is one of the key innovations behind Salus, and why you guys are going to be such a game changer in the commodities market. Like maybe we want to talk a little bit more about that entire attestation and the proof system that you guys have built leveraging IoT actually.
Yeah, sure. I like that too. There's a nice symmetry and circularity to it. I remember back in the day thinking how like the machine economy, this is going to be huge. I think we're nearly there now. There's a couple of big unlocks for us. One is actually Starlink, the ability to go to these very complicated places and connect devices and cameras to have kind of physical real world data capture coming on. And that's actually what we do at the moment in Rwanda, and we're looking to do this in West Africa soon, and all the geographies where we operate. The current physical commodity trade works on a very imperfect web of independent inspectors and kind of attestation points. Things go wrong all the time. Even very senior established players are the victims of, stupid document fraud, quite smart document fraud. Things go wrong all the time. So what we're doing, it's not just taking that existing system and bringing it online, because that doesn't actually necessarily by default upgrade the perfection of security around the physical asset. We talk about the perfection of security. So how do you know where it is, what it is, how much it's worth, that nobody else owns it, that the person who says they own it do own it? And there's a whole bunch of stuff that we do on our process. So for each transaction, we'll collect maybe, I think, between 30 and 40 data points that are really critical. And we have mobile applications that are in the hands of the inspectors on the ground. It requires two-factor authentication. You have to upload your passport. You have to scan in. So we're increasing the sort of document submission. That doesn't sound too fancy, but like a lot of this industry works on like anonymous people, literally like, the company inspection lab in a port, like company email address, emailing a document in. Like we've upgraded that so that it's something that we know it's geotagged. We know when they took it. We also have live camera feeds. So we have images of all of our material that we have in storage. We weigh it going in. We use XRF guns, so X-ray guns, to inspect the quality of the material, so we know what it is, what its mineral properties are, and we capture all of this batch by batch. And that's really a scalable, extensible process that's upstream of the blockchain layer. So we think about how we manage identity and trust of the people performing that work. But then once it's done, you've got this real backlog of not backlog, but background of data points coming from the physical world, and some of them are live. Like I can see right now, I can look in the container and I can see the material. We use tracking devices, we use RFID tagging, but we pull all of that data together. And that's really important for two reasons. One is exactly, and the most important reason is so that you can be sure that there is a real world asset still there behind the material. The second is the benefits you get with a lot more data security and provenance, is particularly for things where there are, there's a risk of child mining or really bad environmental practices. You want to make sure that Apple, for example, when they buy critical minerals, they have a very long list of things that you have to do to prove that you're a good supplier and that you comply with the highest standards. So you want to sell to Apple, you need to be able to demonstrate where the materials come from, that the mining certification was in place, that you have safety processes, that you do not employ child labor. All of these things have to be documented somewhere. And it's not really the main focus of Salus. We're providing liquidity, and that's why people come to our platform. But you also get this provenance data, which is increasingly important. And again, that's like a proper OG blockchain use case. It's really important. And another thing that comes from if you really instrumentize the real world is your costs of insurance, which is really important. All of these cargoes are physically insured. That comes down as well. So you're able to get very competitive cover because the insurers and the underwriters can see how the thing's being run, can be assured of the process, and there's more data. So it's this real world data acquisition and real time kind of keeping that update that really de-risks the transaction and makes it comfortable for new capital to enter into the space and provide liquidity.
Yeah, amazing. So a lot of benefits that we already touched upon. I'm wondering what the benefit for the so for the transport, I think we have a very good idea of that now. But for the people that are providing the rare earths, wondering what the benefit for them is to use Salus.
Yeah, so critical minerals is the big catch-all term. Within critical minerals, you have things that are not that rare, like copper, but very important for energy transition, data center, electrification of power grids. And then you have rare earths, which are some of the funkier elements that you might have to remember your chemistry lesson back in the day to remember which part of the periodic table they're on, but they're really important for high performance componentry, and there's a lot of those. So we're working in Rwanda with a tantalite producer, That's something that goes into capacitors, which are used in electronic components and data centers. So that's going into the US. They are aggregating from their own mine and buying locally small batches of this material, and compounding that into a big container, which then gets shipped internationally and sold on the global market. That's really capital intensive. This material is quite expensive. You're talking about, a bag that you could lift being worth $20,000, and you can imagine how many you get in a container. That's a real expensive activity to accumulate that. So you need working capital. And there just isn't that much working capital for this kind of a business. They do an important job. They are a really good actor. They go to real lengths to make sure they're responsibly sourcing. They want to pay their suppliers quickly and on time. If they're unable to buy, typically the material will be sold maybe to a Chinese trader or an international commodity trader that will have to build in a big margin, or they won't get payment terms that make sense. They'll only get paid when the material arrives or later, and that doesn't really work for people who are, needing to buy fuel and food and keep their operations going. So it's really the reason why people come to the Salus platform is because they need finance, and they can secure the finance against the material that they operate with. And they can pay a return for that might seem high by our standards, but the alternatives, or by like kind of corporate debt standards, but actually in those countries there just isn't any working capital available, and so the alternative is like massive margin compression from selling it somewhere else. So working capital at a sensible rate that allows them to grow and expand their operations, and then the offer is kind of over time, as they build up their trade and they show that they can perform and that they're running a good operation over time, which all of the folks that we're speaking to do, that's really clear for the funders to see. And then you just let markets do the job. And as the thing becomes more evidenced, less risk, again, which is a nice thing to have an immutable trail of, you can expect the cost of capital to come down. So that's why these suppliers, producers, and traders are coming to this platform. And that's true, by the way, not just for critical minerals or commodities. That's throughout supply chains. Wherever you have credit or working capital finance, it's usually extremely expensive and high margin. And it needn't be, because if you can make the asset really clear, change the risk profile, you can attract a much fairer rate of capital.
Not sure if I'm audible right now. Glitching out on.
No, we can hear you.
Yeah,
I think
you're on.
All right. Yeah, my mute button is acting a little bit funky, but yeah, thanks for that explanation. So it does sound like there will be a convergence of basically operating DeFi or working in that, and that it actually has a positive impact in the real world then. So yeah, wondering how would that look like for a DeFi end user when they go to the Salus platform? What will they be looking at?
Yeah, so we're working with a number of different on-ramps for capital. So people who want to come to us and start backing these trades. The far kind of like in a year or two, we'll work out how to do this for kind of native Web3 retail. Maybe there's a whole bunch of regulatory things we need to figure out. But in the meanwhile, there are other sources of capital also that are aggregating some of that liquidity. And really the call to action there is if you've got some balances in stable coins and you want to start getting a yield for it, we need to kind of work on an on-ramp for that. So we've got a couple of irons in the fire. We can't reveal too much just yet, but for the next phase of growth for Salus, the capital will come from our existing funders and co-founders TradeFlow. We're also launching a Salus Critical Minerals TradeFlow fund within that, specifically focused on that. So we're bringing that to market for, I have to say, qualified investors. So that's not for broad market, but just for context. And then beyond that, there are certain treasuries and kind of large professional investors that are coming onto the platform directly and being a bit more hands-on because they like to see the impact and kind of where their money is and get a bit more involved. So the answer to your question is not much just yet. We're working on the bigger institutional pools of liquidity, but we're working on some ways to tap that scale because we know that there are communities within DeFi Web3 and indeed IOTA who want to see their assets going to work, getting a yield, and seeing some impact as a result. And quite frankly, I much prefer building software for those guys than the banks.
Jonathan, are you there?
How's that glitchy mute button? I'm still here.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah. No, I think I think bringing these real world assets on-chain is really such a huge unlock. And I think like what excites me the most about our work together is that it makes economic sense, right? Like this is actually traders that now have much better funding terms than they could have in the real world. Oftentimes these banks don't want to trade with them, right? Like unbanked unbanked is a huge issue for many of these people or these traders and these companies, right? And I think we're really giving them access to new sources of capital that they couldn't have before. While it makes economic sense and very exciting, it's creating real world impact, right? Because I remember some of these stories that you told me about these traders in Rwanda or the work that we're doing in Kenya, right? They're so grateful that they are able to get financing for 12-15% instead of having to pay 20 to 25% or worse, having to wait 60, 90 days to get their financing. So having real life impact on those local economies. And I think that's like the perfect combination where it makes business sense, economic sense. Everybody's happy about it. It's a win-win-win situation for everybody. And it's creating a positive impact. So I think what I really want to focus on next, and I think this is really like where our partnership is really going to the next level, is like how can we scale this, right? How can we really bring not millions but tens and hundreds of millions of assets on chain and also fuel those assets into like stable coins and into new kind of DeFi products that the market hasn't seen yet, that is only possible on IOTA, right? So I think this is super exciting.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. The impact I think is real, and there's something about it like it's maybe a little bit geeky, but like in the commodities world, you used to be able to make money out of like they used to call it like an asymmetry of information. So I know something that somebody doesn't know about their business, therefore I can do a deal with them that they won't know is a bad deal. Or I've got more balance sheet at this time, therefore I can kind of name my price. Or I'm the only buyer who can move this commodity because I've got a vessel and nobody else has. And that just doesn't really work kind of in the post internet era, right? We're in an era where there's a lot of information, a lot of people can process a lot of information. So kind of information asymmetry isn't really the play anymore. By bringing these assets on chain and bringing the track record, the performance on chain, you're able to offer a much more fair and kind of equitable process. You can put a fair hand into places like Africa, where international capital can come in and say, look, you correspond to these standards that your government and our government signed up to. You're going to get your capital a bit cheaper. And it's no longer about trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. Anyway, so that's a bit of a philosophical note, but there's something about transparency and kind of fairness and truth really kind of determining how much stuff should cost. And that's something that we're enabling, and we've already seen some of the benefits there.
And I think to that, the really exciting thing right now is we're coming into this area with quite a tailwind. I mean, when I started this work in this area 8-10 years ago, we were imagining exactly these kind of things. And there were lots of barriers that was not even understood by the industry. But right now we have a lot of tailwind in the wider community. Everybody's agreeing on what are the right data standards. Everybody is agreeing on, what does it mean to have trust? We have new regulatory requirements that allow digital exchange. and you are setting up, you're seeing now standards on how do we represent organizations digitally, and not only in one country, but in jurisdictions outside their own. So you actually know who are you trading with. When things goes to US, the US can see the guys on the ground and who they are, and resolve their identity. And all that tailwind is coming in at the moment. So it's a very, very exciting time to unlock all of this for the next year, I think. And
Definitely.
learning from what you're doing, James. I mean, we really hope in the wider IOTA and Twin community that we can learn from the way you're doing this, and see how do we scale across other commodities. So that's
Yep.
really, really exciting.
All right. Yeah, I'm back, but I see you guys can do just fine without me. But I think we just dropped Dom. Yeah, I wanted to segue this nicely into talking a little bit about how to imagine really the trifecta of IOTA, of Salus, and Twin. Maybe you can paint a little bit of a picture of how that collaboration will look like in the future.
Yeah, sure. Let me describe Salus. So our business model is really clear. So we're a for-profit business. We see our core service offering as transforming complicated, uninvestable, multifaceted supply chains, like we've been talking about, into investable digital assets. So we're like a SaaS business. We're charging a fee for digital risk transformation, we call it, as a service, and we bring it up to the point of tokenization. To do this, of course, we need to have reliable components. We need to have standards. We need to have joined up conversations with government officials in different countries, working with multinational organizations, standard setters. So there's a lot of common touch points with the work that Twin's doing, and of course on a technical basis with the IOTA team. So we're really building out this service layer on top of the IOTA frameworks, and in conjunction with the Twin components and mission.
Yeah, which leads to the role that we try to play with Twin is to become an infrastructure that is trusted by governments and industry alike, and can provide these components that James need. And these components are, I mean, if you pin them down to the bare bone of those different modules you need to have a digital identity, and you need a way to, in a decentralized way, share data and collaborate around data. And then you need to tokenize and be able to move ownership around in a digital ecosystem. So for the Trend side, we're focusing a lot on how do we turn these things into an infrastructure, and who do we need to partner with. So we partner with governments, we partner with international organizations like the World Economic Forum, the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, Trademark Africa, and so on, to ensure that we are building something that is accepted by especially governments. We will focus on in Twin, to focus on this as an infrastructure layer. And of course, all this is fueled by the capabilities that IOTA brings in, which are bringing in capabilities that are faster and more low cost as a blockchain than most other blockchains, right? So there's quite a nice, you can see the stack building up towards enabling Salus and other businesses like this.
Yeah, for sure. I think everybody is quite happy to see so much of the IOTA tech stack being used in a sensible way. So that is for sure great to see. Yeah, I'm wondering what the next immediate steps are for Salus. Will that be to expand to different regions, or will that, for example, take shape in expanding to new industries? How would that look like?
Yeah, so we're super busy with our customer journey. So we're adding a couple of different flows of minerals, so different commodities, different jurisdictions, different geographies. So there's some technical work to do, some onboarding. We're building out as we go. We've got a really solid platform that we've built and invested in and we're deployed, but we're always extending it. So we're adding new customers. And then the big focus for us is working out how we can bring this story to liquidity providers, people looking for yield. There's a lot of work attracting funders to the platform, which is really important. And we've got some pretty neat bits of technology. We've just filed some patents on some of it, but we're working out some really cool things. Just to give you a sneak peek, I have actually just taken delivery of a smart lock. So a physical lock that goes on a container, and we're trying to make it so that the transactions on the IOTA wallet as the title moves, as the ownership title moves and the payment happens, the physical locks and unlocks. So there's a whole bunch of things like that we want to kind of put into the real world. So lots more really cool technology with some very cool blockchain components at the middle of it. But at the core basis, yeah, we've got something that's ready to scale. So we're adding. We're trying to target $100 million of flows by the end of the year, a couple of different geographies, and then building out our funders on the platform as well.
All right. Yeah. So for all of the builders and suppliers and potential funders that are listening in, so what would be the best way to get in touch with you and explore how to, tap into Salus, build on top of it, or all of that good stuff?
Yeah, look, reach out. You know where to find us. We're here on X. We've got a website. You can reach out to us and learn a little bit more. And we're always happy to hear from like-minded folks who want to move this really important, slightly behind the times part of the global economy forward. So yeah, please do reach out, particularly on the funding side. That's really where I think we can do the most impact at the moment.
Yeah, sounds great. So I'm just left wondering whether there is anything that we missed to bring up, anything burning under your fingernails to get out there. Then this would be a good chance. If not, then I think we can move to the closing statements. But first, wanting to pass off that chance, whether there is anything that we forgot to discuss here in this space. I thought so as well. Let me pass off the mic for the closing statements. Dom, I think you're unmuted right now. Why don't we start with you? Anything that you want to leave the community with?
No, like I think for me it is like a really exciting inflection point, right, where everything is really coming together, and we're bringing this activity, this real world activity, these real world assets on-chain on IOTA. And I think with Salus we'll be able to share very soon the mainnet integration as well, so people can actually see what's happening there and can follow it. And I think with Twin as well. And so I think this will really dawn upon the entire crypto space very soon, that we actually have these integrations and these on-ramps of physical assets and real life activity that no other blockchain actually has in this space. So I think it's really exciting to move forward and to actually have a very clear purpose and very clear focus with IOTA, more so than we've ever had before. And as I said before, we're creating these win-win situations in the real world with the traders that need the better financing options. And we're creating a win situations for the funders, but including people on this call that will be able to participate in these DeFi platforms in the future, where you will be able to earn real yield and not the unsustainable Ponzi-esque structures as they are in other networks. So I think this is really exciting, and we're going to march forward even more over the next couple of months, but where we have some big announcements of new partners coming aboard, of new adoption cases. So I think it's really exciting to watch this unfold and to work together with amazing builders like James and his team, who have built this very quickly. Right. So I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dom. And Jens, over to you. Anything that you want to leave the community with?
Maybe a little cliffhanger, because in our community, in our space, we always knew that identity is a real piece that needs to be tackled, and it's been part of our I would say, our DNA to always have a look at how can you do a resolvable identity for people around the world. And in the global trade and supply chain space, identity is, of course, the key thing if you have the right way to identify organizations. So we are announcing a very exciting partnership within the next 2 weeks, which I think will help us with actually taking that building block forward. So that's my little cliffhanger for for us to talk about in a couple of weeks.
All right, cool. I mean, yeah, expect a DM from me shortly after this space. But yeah, James, anything that you want to leave us with?
I wanna point out that there is not as much commitment. So I've been doing this sort of work in this industry, trying to bring it forwards for a long time. And I've done it from big corporate leaders. I've done it kind of next to government. I've done it in 5 different countries. There is something that's quite unique about the community here and the kind of long-term faith in a better way of doing things that is it's really infectious, it's really persistent, and I think that's going to be the growth driver, and I think that's really what we're seeing here. So this is a great community to be doing this work with. The tools that have been built, they didn't come out of large corporations. That they haven't managed to execute on this vision that the founders of IOTA had back in the day, and that we all still have today. So yeah, I just want to say thanks, and it's a great place to be doing this work. There's a great commercial angle. I like doing things that generate value and money for shareholders, but there's also a huge impact angle, and the kind of the faith and the belief and the hope in the future. I think is founded, and we're very excited, and we're already seeing some benefits. So, kind of thanks.
Well, thank you, James. That has been a beautiful closing statement. And thanks to you as well, Dom and Jens. I think this has been a really interesting space, leaving it a lot smarter than I entered it. So yeah, thanks a lot for joining us. And also big thank you to the audience. Please make sure to leave everybody a like, follow the IOTA account, leave a like for Dom, for Jens, and for James. Do the same for the Salus platform. There is a pinned video here in this space. Please make sure to share it plenty. Let's spread the excitement a little bit. And then, yeah, I'm hoping that we can hopefully do another space together soon. So yeah, thank you all again. And I'm wishing you a beautiful rest of the day. I see you guys on Discord and Telegram. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.